Okay, so our mix for the band starts here. Everybody plugs in the cable to here, and generally want to get them set up around the room so it goes kind of clockwise. That way you don't have to look around and see who everybody is. You could put names down here, but we don't really need to do that if you just put everybody in line. If you have people that aren't going to be doing solos, it can be easier just to kind of put them all over on this side so that the soloists are all right here, and you kind of everybody in line right away who's going to be playing solos. You're going to mix them in, put them at the right volume, and adjust their EQ depending on the kind of instrument they have. For most of the guitars, you're going to have to turn up the mids and the trebles a bunch and not get too much bass response. But a Telly will have a lot more treble response than a Les Paul in most cases. Humbuckers have a little bit less treble in most cases. This is the main gain, and then so you want to adjust that so everybody's basically at the same volume down here when they're turned up. So you get this basically the volume it needs to be. We don't need any effects on anything. Keep it panned in the center. We don't need any of their auxiliary stuff. We're not doing any of that. There will be a little bit of reverb here, but we're not using it because the effect is off, so I don't have to worry about that at all. The guitars are all by default turned on in the submix. So this is the submix slider. Everything that's turned on is going to be at this volume coming out of this cable, and we plugged it into the left one over here. That cable comes out, goes into this first processor, so it goes into the distortion, that comes over into the processor, and then that has to come out of the record out, phones out, because that has a speaker emulator in it. It won't sound like a guitar amp if it's not plugged in there. Don't use the monos. That's a really big deal. The guitars sound funny, make sure it's plugged here. Then that comes out and goes into our main mixer. I think this one is over on this channel. And then that's going to be the actual volume for the guitars. What you actually hear. You want to keep these basically, right where they're supposed to be at the line. And then the actual volume will be what you hear in the mix will be determined by the slider it's plugged into over here. And these are just the guitars generally stay flat because we have all of the equalization and everything set evenly. Remember, have everybody hit their trebliest pickup, the bridge pickup, with volumes all the way up, treble all the way up. That way no one can scream later on in the mix. That's the loudest they're going to get and the harshest they're going to get. They can always make it mellower, but they can't make it harsher than that. So the mix should be an even volume here, even kind of tone between all of them, even kind of gain between all of them. And then they all get mixed down into here in the subs. And then as people go to do a solo, press the main. You don't have to take them out of the sub. They're just part of a mix in the sub, and that's usually a much lower volume in the mix, so you won't really hear too much. And if you do hear it in the sub, it doesn't really hurt. This main mix, person 1 is soloing, person 2 comes in, turn that one off. Don't worry about the subs. All of those are mixed to this volume, and they come out of the main mix back here. That main cable comes around and goes into our other processor setup. So that cable is coming in here, and the distortion comes out, goes into here, and then we have our setup, and the main cable there again comes out of the recording out 1/4 inch, and that comes in to a separate slider over here. So one slider is the sub, one slider is the lead, and that's going to be the actual volume in the mix. So everybody should be about the same over here. This is going to be set up as a lead sound all the time. Make sure when we're playing a song that the distortion is kind of turned off while we're playing so there's not that much noise. If you have a really big distortion sound, like a lot of times I'll turn on the distortion, the delay, and the boost for a lead solo, and that's going to be really noisy. So I'll just turn those things off while we're playing. And then when the solos come, turn that on, get the first person in the mix, and then switch between the mixes when they're done, come back and just turn this off so it's not so noisy the whole time. But in general, we want this set up the way it's going to be to go for a solo with the right volumes and all. And this one usually is going to be a clean sound. If we're doing some stuff like blues or Sunshine Your Love, we'll turn on distortion. The distortions usually have the overdrive all the way up on these tube screamers, the tone just a little bit to the right of center, 1 or 2 o'clock, and then the volume as needed. It should basically sound like the same instrument, just with a little more breakup, a little more sustain. The tone should be pretty much the same. That's kind of what the reason why we use these tube screamers is that they do keep the tone very similar. You have a mid-range boost with some breakup, but the tone really can have the same kind of integrity it does when it's clean. So come in here. That's distortion, and then for a lead sound, I have these set up. You can kind of see how the dials are set up. This is set to solo. That's just basically a boost. There's a little bit more sustain added with these, but I don't want too much, or else it'll really kind of make it sound too forceful. And this is the volume, so you can adjust the volume for that lead channel. Press that, and it comes on. So that'll be a good lead sound. We usually have the delay on, so we're using this modulation effect for delay, and the delay is set around 450 milliseconds, and we turn down, so you hear maybe like 1 or 2-ish kind of repeats. That's it. This is the dial that'll turn up the number of feedbacks, that how many times it taps back, and then this is the volume of the tap, so about halfway up. So this is about half. This is almost all the way down, and this is about half also. This distortion, so I kind of choose between the lead sound. I usually keep this one set to a really natural kind of sounding distortion. We don't want too much crazy overdrive. When you stack these things, they get really distorted. So not too much drive, keep the tone sort of mellow, and then basically a lot of volume, and that'll really give it some extra oomph. So either this one, this is a more distorted sound, this is a more clean sound. Like if you want to have a lead sound without distortion, just put that on. And for any of the big lead sounds, you want to have some delay on. It'll really give it a lot more, a lot more character and ambience. And same thing over here. So we have these things all basically the same. The tone, we're just using tweed all the time. These little bosses have a really good sound with a lot of integrity. If we put on the tweed sound, gain less than halfway, bass less than halfway, mids all the way up, and treble up as you need it, so it's not too harsh. And then the volume should be right in the center. Output should be in the center. The reverb I leave usually on 19 or 20, somewhere in there, somewhere around there. That gets a good ambience. That just stays on all the time. That's on both. Cool. Okay, so when people are playing, it's not so much that you have to do a tap dance like you normally do, and you're turning things on and off. We'll have one main lead sound. Turn the distortion on, turn one of the boosts on for most of the leads. Keep the delay on all the time. It's fine for a lead sound. And here, really nothing. It's going to be either clean or
you got to go lead, basically.
A little bit of overdrive. When we want to do a song that has acoustic guitar, this G5 sound is set up as our acoustic sound. Take the cable that would go into, probably actually for the whole group, into the the rhythm mix, and plug that in. And then that cable comes out and goes into another over here. Okay. And I usually set it up the same way all the time. I have all the vocals over on the left. These cables come directly from the mics. So when you set up the mics, you want to make sure that they're right at the volume of right at the height of the singer, and that they can just kind of reach around and go right in front of the music that anybody's looking at. Wrap the cable around a couple times. Put the clip on the bottom. They're meant to go on the top, but they always fall. So just put it on the bottom. If you need to move it over a little, you can then, but it won't go out of the way completely. Wrap the cable a couple times so that if there's a little pressure on it, if someone tugs on it somewhere, it doesn't come loose here. When you're setting these things up, it's always better to have them more vertical instead of completely out, because again, they'll sag. Keep them straight up. The bass. There's a cable there on the ground that we use for the bass here. That just comes out, and I usually put that always over to the right. That's going to be, the vocals will be the loudest thing in the group. They should be as loud or louder than the entire group together. So really going to set the volume based on how loud you can get the singer before it starts to feedback. When it really gets loud, so you need to be really careful here. In this room, we have the mains coming out from the right side here, coming out of a quarter-inch cable, and that's going over to this one. And then there's a XLR coming out, going into the speaker over there. And you keep these volumes, basically everything generally is even. I put a little bit more bass on here just to have more bass response, but you know, even, not too loud. And then the way it's just gotten set up here over the last few times we've used it, these are backwards. The slider is doing the left-hand side, and this one's doing the right. Some cables broke, so we're using a 1/4 inch here. When we set up at the shows, we will use XLRs for the speakers. The little speakers we're going to be using won't even take a 1/4 inch. They will, but they won't give you enough volume. So we'll use XLRs. So there's these XLR outputs in the back. The mains outputs in the back there are the exact same mix. They're both main outputs. Just a format difference. You can use 1/4 inches here, and you can use XLRs in the back. And here I'm using this speaker a little more like a bass speaker, so I have the bass really pushed up.
Okay.
So if you need a little more bass, turn this one up. That'll get a little more bass response. So normally in a band, just use this mixer. Vocals will be plugged in over here. This one right now is extra. Let's take that out. That's just an extra cable going over there. This is the drum machine / acoustic thing, the Boss, or not the Boss, the Zoom.
Okay.
The black and blue Zoom. And then these two are the guitars. This is the main one. This is the submix, and this is the bass. And I just generally keep that lineup all the time, so I always know bass is on that side, vocals are on this side, and the main person's over here. This is the one I'm on right now. So if you're hooking up one of these other mics that are already plugged in, they'll be these two. Mine's right here right now. Cool. When you do the vocals, you're going to want to turn up the mids a little bit. So these are sweepable mids. You can turn up the amount of mid and then the frequency of the mid. So as you turn this up, it boosts the higher frequency. Okay. So you don't want to boost the high frequencies too much because that'll feed back. It brings some clarity, but we get that really with the mids and not too much bass for most people. It just kind of ends up being boomy in the room. And in those, we want to use a lot of the built-in reverb. There's a reverb over here, just whichever reverb. It's going to sound like a lot of reverb when we're not playing. Just like this delay is going to sound like a lot of delay on the guitar, but it works beautifully and gives you the sound you're used to. So you can see where the settings are. Again, everything's panned in the center. You don't have anything else mixed in. And the EQs are all set as needed. This is the general kind of setup for a vocal mic. The guitars, basically, we're keeping flat because we're doing all that EQing and processing here. If we get out and the guitars sound kind of weeny, you can give it a little more mid. The guitars always need a little more mid. And of course, bass you just adjust. It turns out with his bass, I've had to turn the lows down a little bit. Okay. Because it just was muddy without. He's got so much response in that bass. So again, everything here is going to main. And that's our main mix going out. If we were to use monitors, so when we go to play at a place, we'll put these main speakers out front. They'll be facing and they'll be away. So we'll all be facing that way. We'll put the speakers on stands. When we go to get the stands, we want to make sure we get stands. They're all upstairs. Stands for the speakers, or else they'll be on the floor. People won't be able to hear them. Those will be in front so that they don't feed back at all.
Yeah, I understand.
Here we have them facing away because if they were facing toward the mic, they would just feed back immediately. We get a kind of weird bass response by pointing them toward the wall, but it works.
Yeah,
it works in here.
It's tight quarters.
Yeah, it works in here. So put the speakers out this way. If we wanted, we could put a couple little monitors. Usually I have one monitor, and that'll kind of come right here. And that way everybody can sort of hear what's going out. It's all going to be in one mix. We have to mix this with the drums. It's the hardest thing because it's the only acoustic thing. So we just got to get it, someone's got to kind of stand out there and say, listen to all this. Let's get a little sound check and make sure the drums can be heard. Because on stage, the drums are going to be a lot louder than they are out front. And they're going to feel like they're crazy loud, but we have to make it work for where it is out, in front of the speakers. So we'll have one little speaker. That could come just from the submix. We could turn the submix on for anything that we want to hear in there. In our case, we'd probably turn everything in there and just send it out directly to us.
Now, do we mic the drums?
We're not going to need to for a little place.
Not for this small place.
Not for a little place. We could, you could put a 57 or just like one room, like space mic over it. But for a place like this, even when we play, a few hundred people, you don't need it.
I didn't think so. I was just checking. Yep.
So someone's going to have to do. You did the mixing last time, or just popping people into the lead channel. But someone's also going to have to turn all this stuff on. So knowing where these setups are, this is kind of critical. getting that tweed sound. For this setup, it's what works best. Getting the gains about where they are there, because when we're setting things up, all these dials will have gotten moved.
Yep.
So there's the boost setup on solo. There's the more aggressive distortion setup. That'll give us a lot of distortion, more than we need for anything we're doing. There's the delay, and this is just, if we're going to use the looper, we're not going to do anything. If we wanted to turn on wah, we'd just do that. Cool. And I showed in the other video. Let's do it one more time just to make sure. Come on up. Everything's up here that we need. In the back room here. So we've got extra instruments. There's a bass. There's some guitars. I just take these couple. And the mic stands, the speaker stands. If we need more, there's a music stand back there. If we need more, grab them. But generally, want to leave everything down there.
Yeah, we don't want to.
These things are awesome. They're little 2,000 watt speakers. They weigh like 20 pounds, and we've been using those for our shows. I use this as our monitor. This is $2,500 worth of speakers, so we want to be really careful. Don't want to blow them out. I'd rather use some other speakers, honestly. I'll show you where those are, but if I'm there with you, we can use these. These are my mic bags. My bags for doing all of my little solo gigs and stuff, and everything I need to just have a quick setup for. I'd rather not touch these. We can bring them, but I want to be really careful not to get anything, because I don't go through these regularly. I make sure they're perfect.
Got it.
I make sure they're perfectly set up. Use the one that's ripped. They're duplicate setups, So usually when I go to a gig, I take this in with me. I leave it out in the car, and I just bring in what I need, those couple speakers, and I'm ready to go. We'll use this one as a monitor, but that's a really good QSC. It's like a $700, $800 speaker. So over here, there's the rest of the stuff. The actual stuff we use for Rockfactory events. Everything you need is in these two bags. Just moved the drum kit. We just moved it in here. We have another huge mixer. The only thing we should take out of the room is that mixer, the big mixer downstairs that we plug the guitars into.
Okay.
We could use this, but it's too big. If we had keyboards, we have keyboards in here if we need to bring them. There's a ukulele and a bunch of other stuff in here, but we don't need any of that stuff. Just everything is in here. There is another speaker, and I think, honestly, I'd like to bring this one. It's back here. Try and use some of these. That's still a really good Yamaha speaker. It's $500-600, but it's just not as expensive as the other ones. And I'm not relying on that to do my gigs. So I just want to make sure I have a couple of those good. There's more instruments. No, that other Yamaha is the only extra one. There's just some more other instruments. If anybody needs something, we can always grab another instrument. But I like to leave all this stuff completely intact.
I've already thought of that.
The green bag back here has a ton of guitar stands, folding guitar stands, and folding music stands. And if we need to, we can grab one or two. But I want to, again, try and keep all this stuff here. If we need another mic stand, just grab this one. This one or that one. But 2 or 3 is probably what we'll need. I think there's 2 upstairs, so you might have to grab one of these. And then the other speaker we might want to grab is just this one right here.
I actually noticed it when I walked in this morning.
Yeah, that one's. That's another one. It's been tested. It's good. It's the same one that we have in there. I mean, even this by itself is enough to do a room. That and the little Yamaha is probably a good, usable set. There's another one here if there's ever an emergency, but again, this is set up for lessons. So I'm trying to avoid. That's a duplicate of the one that we have here. And of course, if there's an emergency, we can always use these. But it's just too much to come in and set everything up all the time.
We don't want to take this apart.
Yeah, and so the drum kit's here. If we were to do a gig and we needed a drum kit, I would use the electric kit that's in that room back there. That's a really good Yamaha kit. This one, the guys like to use it for our recitals. I just don't have to take it apart, put it down. We'll get a really good sound from the electronic kit in there. That one has a great feel. So that's the full rig. Nothing else is needed. No guitar amps.
So you said the only thing that comes out of this room is that one mixer?
Yeah. And if you need to grab one more mic stand and a
music stand, that's cool, but nothing.
Yeah, this is the mixer you need. We don't have another big mixer aside from that huge one upstairs. This is the one. This is the only purpose for this is to do group things, so to plug in a ton of guitars. So that's what that's for. And the only reason we have 2 mixers in there, but they don't have enough inputs for everybody. If we have 10 people, there's not enough on a regular mixer to pull that off well. So to give everybody their own channel. On here we have plenty of inputs for everybody. Okay, so I think that's it. The drum machine. The drum machine, you press. So Press home. That gives you the sound you want. G5 or G4 on this one. And whatever, we have a bunch of these, up in those setups in those bags. So you'll have an acoustic sound somewhere. You just got to kind of look for it. It should be on it.
Okay.
That's really all we use those for. So just get the acoustic sound going, and then press this, and that gives us a drum machine. If you press it again, it gives us a looper. We're not going to use the looper. Press it again, it goes back, and you press start.